She is a global economist and author of Edge of Chaos, Why Democracy is Failing to Deliver Economic Growth and How to Fix It. Dambisa Moyo. Hey. Hi, Dambisa. Great to have you back on our show. Congratulations on your book. It's terrific. I think you have the right topic. I'm also worried about democracies dying. Tell me why so many people aren't concerned. And like, it seems when you say democracy is in trouble, I think a lot of people, it seems so abstract. How do we make it personal to them and let them know it's important to their actual lives?
Well, there are a whole host of factors that are suggesting that democracy is under siege. For one thing, voters' participation rates are down considerably. They're around 50%
everywhere
on average.
Or here?
Well, mainly the United States is the vanguard of liberal democracy, so I'm particularly focused on the U.S., but of course across Western Europe, where democracy is also prevalent, we are seeing very low participation rates.
Okay.
For low-income households, it's even worse. It's less than 30% by some studies. And the deep concern there is that this is really far from the one-man, one-vote mantra of democracy. But the other issue is that money has seeped into politics. There are about 158 families in this country that are responsible for 50% of the political contributions to the president in 2016. Lobbying has doubled in the past couple of decades.
So people feel disconnected.
Absolutely disaffected. And, you know, there are studies from Pew, the think tank, that 80% of Americans just don't even trust the federal government to do what's right on a regular basis.
And we don't really teach civics as much as we should anymore. So I don't think people know what's missing because they didn't know it was there to begin with.
I think that's absolutely right. And, you know, issues around civics and education, but also there are really no minimum standards for being a politician anymore in the way that they used to be.
No.
We don't have politicians who have experience in agriculture as farmers and teachers and lawyers. We now have, you know, professional politicians, and I think that's a great disservice to us as well.
So a lot of people around the world, younger people, they look to China now because China gets things done, but it's not a democracy.
So you're hitting on exactly the central part of the thesis of my book, which is this myopia in liberal political systems is particularly problematic. All the problems that the global economy and the United States is facing over the next decades are long-term intergenerational problems, things like the amount of debt, income inequality worsening, the risk of technology killing off jobs. I mean, those are all very, very deep structural problems, and yet our politicians are very short-term. They're thinking about the next election, and this creates this schism.
Yeah, how do we make them not do that? How do we? I mean, that's what. But really, I mean, that's why China succeeds, because, I mean, of course, you know, if you have a dictatorship, you don't have to ask somebody if we should do it. They go, well, let's switch from coal and let's do it tomorrow. Yeah. And they can do that, or they can bring people out of poverty, which they have.
Yes.
But you don't want to live in a country, or I wouldn't want to live in a country with that form of government.
Exactly, and we live here because we want
to. But they can think 25 years ahead. We don't think 25 months ahead.
Yes,
how do we incentivize politicians to do that?
Well, I think we can incentivize them by linking their pay to longer-term outcomes. I think one of the problems here is, well, their compensation, I think, should be higher, but they should be forced to justify their compensation just the way we are forced to justify compensation in private sector. Yeah, exactly.
So that we don't get the dregs and that,
Exactly, but also in Singapore, for example, you know, the politicians are actually paid bonuses at the end of the year based on long-term outcomes. What happened to life expectancy? What happened to GDP? I mean, in this country, our politicians are basically paid.
We get people like this Scott Pruitt guy. Do you know this guy, the head of the EPA?
Yes.
Who I think he's in government just because this is as good as it's going to get. I'm flying first class. You know, he's in it for the perks.
Well, you know, I think there's been so much of a revolution around compensation in private sector. I don't see why we shouldn't apply such stringent rules to the public sector as well.
But some of your fixes for democracy sound like going backwards, or at least they sound like it. Maybe they're not. But you're talking about weighted voting, which is where some people who are experts, but how do you determine that sometimes, get more of a vote, and what they used to call a poll tax. Yeah, you know, giving people an exam before they can vote. I can certainly see this. Yeah, I hear you huffing and puffing already. I heard that.
Well, we certainly don't want that. I mean, I think I'd be the first person disenfranchised if I actually started proposing weighted voting. So we don't want it in a way that adjectives such as wealth or race or gender are the guidelines. But as an immigrant coming to this country, you are required to take a civics test. And essentially, I think it's really about showing engagement and caring about the civics and also the political process. And that's really what I think is worth considering.